My third time ever getting drunk, I drank two of my dad's coworkers and friends under the table. I had 23 shots and 4 mixed drinks, and I still wanted to party at at 2 a.m. I think the epiphany was line school and realizing I was not living the life that I wanted. I was ashamed of the life that I was living. There was nothing for me to be proud of. Stepping out of my comfort zone and realizing what I enjoy and what I don't is such a it's a good feeling. Like, what did I enjoy doing just because I drank? Well, the alcohol's not there. Do I enjoy doing that? No. So why am I wasting my time doing that?
RJ, welcome to the podcast. It's good to kind of finally speak to you face to face. Obviously, I've been aware of your stuff since you had our friend up for the challenge on the podcast about 3 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, it's been that long already, which it does not feel like it.
No, definitely not. Right, I want you to obviously take us through your journey of sobriety and like what that means to you and all the rest of it. But like, I think any kind of sobriety story probably needs to start with the before. Right. what was life like before? Like, what was your early relationship with alcohol like?
So, I'm RJ Zimmerman. I'm an alcoholic. Start with that. When I was growing up, I grew up in Wisconsin in the United States. And a lot of people don't know the culture of Wisconsin. So alcohol is a way of life. It is ingrained in literally everything in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, it's legal for parents to give their kids any age a drink. Not just a drink, as many as they want. So it's looked at, underage drinking is looked at as a rite of passage. And I think that that's true for a lot of cultures, right?
Yeah.
But it's not just a rite of passage. It's like how you do it. So I grew up knowing this. I also grew up, my dad went sober, cold turkey, when I was like 7 or 8, probably. He's been sober ever since, no relapses. I remember my dad drunk once, maybe. And, my brother and sister never saw him drunk. So I'm the oldest. So I knew that it ran in my family. I saw some of my uncles that have a problem with alcohol. I've seen, my grandpa he had many bouts of sobriety. So I knew like it was in my family. I knew that I had to be careful with it. I didn't drink until I had a sip of whiskey when I was in 7th or 8th grade, like just a sip, and I hated it. My friend gave me a sip and he's like, "Don't you feel like, a badass?" And I'm like, "Not really. It just it burns. Who likes that?"
Yeah.
I had like some Mike's Hard Lemonade in sophomore year of high school, but I didn't really start drinking until my senior year. And most of the reason was I was scared of getting disciplined in sports. So sports were like what I based almost everything around growing up. So, and not just almost, like it was my entire core of myself was based around sports. So I could not miss a game or anything. So I was scared to drink till my senior year. I drank at our homecoming, and that was the first time I ever got drunk. And that feeling was, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It was amazing. Like, it was incredible. Like, I felt like I could be myself and not worry about what other people are thinking, what other people are doing. I could just be me. Mm-hmm. And that was not something that I had experienced before. And that was the last time that I drank during the school year. So the summer I had drank a couple times at some graduation parties. And then my third time ever getting drunk, I drank two of my dad's coworkers and friends under the table. I had 23 shots and 4 mixed drinks, and I still wanted to party at at 2 a.m. And then, wow. I'm 18 years old. And I wake up the next morning like nothing happened. I wake up at 6 o'clock and I'm like, oh, let's go. And from there, I think that was the moment where like I wanted to party. And so college, just basically parties. I knew where all
Before
the
you jump on
specials
from
were.
there, could I just ask one quick question? Like,
Yep, go for it.
your father's co-workers, how did they respond to that? With this, was that like, we've got a cool little badass here, like 18? Well,
Yep.
maybe not little at 18, but we've got like a cool badass here. Like, how did they respond? And did that response kind of, was it kind of like validating? Did it feed into kind of wanting to do it
Absolutely.
more?
They responded exactly like that. Like, how are you drinking this much? Like, my dad didn't, he's to this day doesn't believe that was only my third time drinking. And yeah, like everybody was like, oh my gosh, how are you putting all this away? Like, this is amazing. And the next day they're like, oh, how are you feeling? Fine. They're like, oh, you're really good at this. You're gonna be a good drinker. And so like, that inflates the ego a little bit. And especially for someone who had low self-esteem and self-worth like I did. And then you move on to college and like I'm drinking all of it, but it's fine because that's what everybody's doing, right? The only problem is a lot of people spend their college years figuring out who they are and what they want to do. And I was just confused. My entire life, I put everything around sports. And when I'm on like a basketball court or I'm on like playing baseball, it's just me and I can forget everything. And that's kind of how I felt when I was drunk. Like I could turn my brain off and just react and do fun things that I can be proud of. And I didn't have a high self-esteem off the court. So or off the field.
Yeah.
I didn't try to pursue college. And I was told later that like, I had those skills and they were disappointed that I didn't. And it's like, but nobody told me that. I never felt like I was good enough for myself. And so, that's why I didn't pursue that. So I ended up going 6 years of college, no degree, switched my major. I'm like, you know what? I need to move out of the city. I'm stuck in a rut. I'm just drinking all the time. We have to change something. So I moved down to Madison, Wisconsin, which is the capital. And I decide, you know what? I liked working for utility in the summers. I liked working with the guys my dad is a lineman, so works on high voltage electricity. It's either really high up in the air or it's under the ground. It's like, that was fun. I enjoyed working with my hands. I enjoyed sports. Let's do something with my hands. So I ended up going to line school, got my associate's degree. And in line school, I realized because of the people I was around a lot of former military. I was around a lot of older people who were in my class because, it's people, when you go to be a lineman, like you have to know that that's what you're going to school for. And how serious they were, not just like, I wouldn't even say just like with the program or anything like that or school. It was like life serious. Like they knew who they were. And I was still kind of wishy-washy. I knew I wanted to start a family at this point. I'm 25, 26 years old. I'm like, I need to cut way back on my drinking. So I cut it back to about, I want to say like once a month, maybe once every other month. And I was like, okay, I'm only going to drink this amount of times. And I'm going to try to limit myself to 3 drinks. I'm trying to limit myself to 1 drink. It worked when I was with my girlfriend, now wife. Like if we went out to eat, I would have 1 drink, usually a beer. But if I was out with my friends, I was drinking all of it. There was no stopping. There was a 30-pack in the fridge. That 30-pack is gone before I'm going to bed. And I blacked out. I mean, last 2 years I drank. I blacked out every single time that I drank. And waking up in the morning, wondering who you have to apologize to. A lot of my friends and my wife say that when I drank, I was a fun drunk. Like all I cared about was making other people happy. All I cared about was trying to make sure everybody was having fun and being there for people. But, I would leave my friends and go with these strangers and end up in places like did not know where I was. Luckily a lot of the time that I drank the last few times was in my hometown, which is like 10 blocks. That's about it. So I could find my way around even drunk, but that it got scary. And, there was a couple really bad decisions that I made driving drunk, honestly, all the time. I never got pulled over and I never hurt anybody. Luckily, that's just sheer luck. That was just random. Like making decisions like that. That's not okay. Mm-hmm. But I would hit on women in front of my girlfriend because I just felt like that was
just that was the microphone with me mug of coffee.
Like that was validation for me, right? Like somebody wanted me, that somebody liked my presence. So yeah. I realized after the last time that I drank that if I wanted to be serious and have a family, I had to stop. And it had been coming to this point, right? Like I took the little steps and I had many bouts and I told a few of my friends, like, I need to stop drinking. And no, you'll grow out of it. Everybody grows out of it. But the truth is a lot of people don't. We need to normalize that it's okay that you can't partake in something that a lot of other people are able to. Like there's nothing wrong with that. So luckily one of my best friends, I've known him since like he's in my video recording of my first birthday. Like I've known him, we were born a month apart. He took it seriously with me. And when we would be together with my friends who would kind of push it a little bit, he would get in between and he would say, no, he's not drinking. If you want to do that, then you can leave. And if he wasn't there, I wouldn't be 8 years sober. I think I would still be sober, but I would be probably 4 or less years sober, to be honest. Like it would have taken a few times. But it was because I had a friend like that I was able to stop. I was able to still have fun and feel like I could. But I also avoided bars. I avoided the old places that made me want to drink, which included my entire hometown. That was a big trigger because it's a small town and it just everything about it just reminds me of drunk RJ that I'm ashamed of, to be honest. So, I would hit on women who are married. I would, I would chase people and annoy them. And luckily it never got to the point of being sexual assault or anything like that, but people were uncomfortable and that's not okay. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that is also luck, people looking out for me. And I don't know how far, I don't think you never know. You just never know when you're drunk. You don't know what you're capable of.
Yeah, 100%. So what was it like? You said obviously that, wanting to have a family, was that kind of like a moment of kind of epiphany when you and that friend kind of like worked on this together? Like was there like, what was that moment like?
I think the epiphany was line school and realizing I was not living the life that I wanted. I was ashamed of the life that I was living. There was nothing for me to be proud of. And so that started it. And I looked around and I thought about what I wanted from my life. And some of it was family. Like I felt like my relationship was ready to be taken to the next level. I wanted kids, and I have 2 now. But ultimately, like the final straw was my first 2-day hangover, and I missed an event that I planned with my girlfriend. And it was like, okay, I need to be a serious person. The only way I can be a serious person is if I stop drinking. So it was just through sheer stubbornness that I did it.
At that point, did you consider yourself an alcoholic, or was that a label that came later?
That was much later. I was 7 years sober before I called myself an alcoholic for the first time. Anybody asked, I didn't drink. I don't drink. And oh, why not? I can't stop myself when I start, so I just don't start. And that's, how far it went. One thing you always get though when you say that is, oh, I don't drink very often either. That's the first thing that people come with. I don't drink very often, just like social gatherings, or, well, I might have a beer or two a night after work. You got to take that edge off. And it's like, I don't drink because you drink. I drink because I can't stop. But you hold that mirror up to people and they're not big fans of it.
So you mentioned that, like that kind of moment where you like, yeah, I want to have this family. I want to, like, and you stopped. Was it like, and does that line up exactly with like the 8 years that you are now sober, or were there kind of attempts with relapses or anything in before that?
There's been cravings. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss the taste of beer or miss the taste of a whiskey sour or, from a Coke. I mean, I enjoyed the flavor of a lot of it. And I know there's some people that don't. But especially like I really liked microbrews. So like a good Scotch ale or, even an IPA I enjoyed. There's been for sure a lot of moments, but there has never been a time where it's like, I need to go back and drink this. And part of it was like the first time I made a decision for me to better myself and not to change me for somebody else. Like nobody pushed me that I had to make this change. Like I just decided that I had to do it. And the reason that I have to do it is to be the person that I want to be able to be proud of myself when I wake up in the morning, to be able to, and I mean, it may not be proud of myself, but to remove that shame, which is a good first step.
Yeah. What were the first sort of 1 to 6 months like after this moment?
There were some low times. So like right when I quit drinking, I got a line job, and it was with a company that I thought I probably wouldn't stay with, but maybe I would. It was a lot of travel to build the really big towers. And I knew that I didn't really want to just travel for work, but I wanted to give it a good shot. And I did not enjoy it at all. I lasted a month and a half. It was really racist. So, my wife is black, and they found out that my girlfriend at the time was black, and it was bad. I honestly felt like my life was threatened at one point. So I called the union and I asked them what to do. And then they kind of ran it up the pole, and it got to the owner of the company. And I was just like, listen, I'm the whistleblower now, and everybody knows it. I'm not going back to this place. So I thought I had the job that I wanted. I thought I had a career. And then this happens within my first 2.5, 3 months. But like I said, luckily I'm stubborn. So I'm sitting at home for 2 weeks thinking how I'm going to pay for the new vehicle that I just bought, move on with my life. There's not very many openings right now. And we got to take steps. So I got a job at a telecommunication company. And then from there, I got a job at at the place that I stayed for 8 years. And that helped. I mean, that helped immensely, but like there were some low moments there. Like that first 6 months was rough. I mean, I started 3 different jobs. I had to quit one because it was a hostile work environment. And I was not happy at the second one, but I knew it was just a stepping stone. And I ended up getting to what I thought was going to be the place where, okay, now my life is going to be, there's still going to be low moments. I knew that, but now like I have a job I can be proud of. I work for a company I can be proud of. Like, everything's going to fall into place. I'm going to feel really good at night when I go to bed. Like, this is how it's going to be. And I threw myself into work. Like, anytime there was a storm, I answered the call. I worked as many hours as I could. I focused on learning. So there's a 3.5-year apprenticeship. So I focused on that. And I basically, it was go home or go to work my butt off, come home, eat dinner, go to bed. And I did that for kind of 4 years, basically, before I realized, what am I doing? And honestly, it was my wife that called it out. Like, you do the same thing and you've done it for years and you don't do anything else. And honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know. I never addressed why I drank the way I drank. I never looked into what was going on with me. People would ask me like who I am, like friends and stuff, or like tell me an interesting fact about you, those nice icebreakers.
Yep.
I don't know. Like, I couldn't answer. Who's RJ? I don't know. So one of the things that helped get me through, like when I first started sobriety, was a podcast. And it was Chris Hardwick and his Nerdist podcast. And he would interview celebrities and it would just be about life. It would be about wherever the conversation took them. But sometimes it would come up and he would talk about being sober for 10 plus years. He would talk about his stories of being drunk. And I related to those stories so much. And it gave me such a feeling of hope that I wasn't alone, that somebody knew what I was going through, that other people had been there. And for me, AA in like a 12-step program just wasn't something I was going to do. A lot of that revolves around religion, and I have personal issues with organized religion. So I was just like, it just wasn't going to happen for me. But it is there for people. It works. Like, I'm not saying don't do it, but for me, it had to be another way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I also have issues with organized religion, having formerly been quite religious myself, actually. In fact, actually, I one of my first real exposures to the actual 12 steps was Russell Brand's book on it, Recovery. And basically he obviously just talks about the taking the religious aspects out of it and giving it up to whatever the higher power, you see yourself. And actually, that's one thing I do miss from my time of being in faith, was the whole idea of, there's the higher power. Like, and I still, even though I'm agnostic these days, I still believe that there's some higher power somewhere. So it's like handing it over to God, Buddha, SpongeBob, whoever that happens to be. And I think it's that whole thing that on the days where you think that you're too weak to carry on, that there is something that can handle that burden for you, which I think is a very, very comforting thing. But actually, I don't know if you ever listened to the book, but like the way he kind of just puts it into like plain English, it's like, step one, acknowledge the fact that you fucked up. Step two, take accountability for how fucked up you are and stuff. Yeah. But it's very kind of like, quite quirky and essentially his personality in terms of the 12-step program. But that was kind of one of the things I was going to lead to us, because obviously you said before that it was 7 years before you acknowledged that you were an alcoholic. And I've got to say that my issues with the 12-step program historically were all kind of ones of bias of not really knowing what kind of not really knowing much about it in the slightest, and only really seeing how, especially in the UK, things are presented to us and the conversations are normalized a little bit different than how they are in the US. So I used to always find it fascinating growing up that like people on sitcoms would be like, my lawyer, my therapist. It's like in the UK, it's like, what, my lawyer? It's like we get like a different solicitor every time we move house or whatever it might be. We don't have a lawyer on a retainer somewhere. But also actually, I think America was ahead of us in the idea of actually having a therapist for just your own general well-being. But was this and again, this was a misconception on my part at the time, was the idea of this once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, and ultimately, I think you almost alluded after. So I think I already know where your mind is on this, but I'll I'm just kind of hedging my bets here. Is because you mentioned earlier that some people can enjoy it, like, and it not take over the life. Other people are alcoholics. So to you, is there a difference between someone who drinks and an alcoholic? And if so, what is that difference?
Yeah, honestly, it's that you can control your intake, right? Or you don't, every time you drink, you don't fall into that college pattern of drinking. I think there are people that can have 1-2 a week. I think if you're having honestly more than one a night, and even if it is a one every single night, you might want to take a look at your relationship with alcohol. Why do you have to have a substance that impairs your brain functions every single night?
I have a brain that impairs its own functions perfectly well.
Same, right? So, I mean, like, that's something that I've honestly evolved. Like, I thought, like, when I first went sober, it was okay. There's some people that can drink all the time and they're perfectly fine. They can get through life like that. Like, that's fine with them. But then obviously I notice when people have an issue and they don't want to talk about it or things like that. And it's not my job to point it out. And it's not my job to shame or guilt anybody for their drinking. Right.
Yep.
But I think, like, if you want alcohol with your dinner, if you want alcohol, like, even just like 1 or 2 as a social lubricant, I don't think there's an issue with that. The issue is when you drink to the point, and it's often when you drink to the point that you become another person that you don't recognize. And when people tell stories, even if they're funny stories and they think that they're great, like, you sit there and cringe, and you're like, who is that person? That's not me. Like, who would do that? Like, there were times I got into fights. I don't fight people.
Yeah.
There were times I got into fights when I was drunk. Like, I did grow up with, like, anger, and it was rare that I was an angry drunk, but sometimes it would come out and I wouldn't be able to stop myself. So, and I've never been told that I punched somebody who didn't deserve it, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, that can be a lot of luck, again, is that you just happen to never be speaking to the wrong person at the wrong time, or you had your group of friends there with you, or whatever it might have been, because there's so many different factors on this. Is that, okay, I wasn't in control of that situation, and had any of these other variables have been changed, it might have been an extremely different story. I think my definition for it is the difference between need and want, and this is one of the things I use to keep myself in check. Is the fact, I currently haven't had a drink for about 4 weeks, but only not because of choice of sobriety, just because kind of just on a bit of a health overhaul before my 40th birthday. And I've got a cruise later in the year that I want to fit into a smaller suit for, and I'm not. It's really, I get that. It's a lovely suit, and I'm not buying a bigger one. Everybody, I'm very body positive, and the body positivity movement's like, just buy a bigger suit, and I'm like, no, I want to fit in this one. But yeah, but for me, over lockdown, there was a lot of reasons why my drinking went up. Like, it was just the whole, like, my stress relief was always the gym. The gym was taken away from me. So food went up, drink went up. And it's always that idea, like, okay, I've got control over this. And it's like, okay, but I always say that if I get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh my God, I need a drink. If I'm like, do you actually need one, or do you want one? Because if you need one, you're definitely not having one. And that's my rule. And I have to be honest with myself on that one. And I try to never let myself have a drink when I need one. That's like, that's a
good definition of somebody who has a good relationship, a healthy relationship with it. Right. Like,
yeah, well, I hope so. I know I've used everything in the world as a coping strategy one time or another, you see. So I know that I don't feel I've ever been fully addicted to anything, because I even was using Class A drugs at one point, and I had Class A drugs in the house that I wouldn't use unless I was going out. You know, they just stay in the house, and no matter how low my mood got, I didn't just be like, right, let's do a couple of bumps of cocaine just to get my mood up. Like, you know, I'm glad that. So for that, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I consider myself to not have an addictive personality, because I can, you know, but then also all the research I've done on addiction, it's like, well, actually, usually the addict likes to think of themselves as not an addict because they've got some degree of control. And like what you said, if you're out with your girlfriend, you could control it to one, or you could say, I'm not going to drink for a couple of weeks or whatever. But ultimately still it came back. So what I want to do is kind of bring that back to, what was it that made you then? Because I thought the answer was going to be a 12-step program, but given what you've already said, I'm guessing maybe not. But what was it that made you 7 years into your sobriety then say, I am an alcoholic?
The podcast. So, you know, the podcast I spoke about, Nerdist, like made me feel not alone. And I wanted to give that to other people. And so my brother-in-law, also sober, and he went sober about 2 or 3 years after I started my sobriety. We would go golfing. We'd have these really good conversations, like knowing that somebody else feels the same way we do when we drink. And honestly, like you said, like I know I have that addictive personality because it went into work. It went into video games. Like certain video games will grab me. Like I know it's there. So I have to keep that top of mind when I do things that I know will give me that dopamine rush.
Yeah, video games are the one that I have occasionally skipped work for.
So, but for me, it does end up going away after a little while. But I know some people, they have problems stepping away. So, and I have impulse control issues too. And I know that's from my ADHD. That's from a little bit of my addictive personality and getting that dopamine, like stuff like that. So anyway, I decided that I wanted to start a podcast to let other people know that they're not alone. And I wanted to talk about sobriety and how it started as everything in my life revolves around my sobriety. And it affects my sobriety, but my sobriety doesn't affect everything in my life, right? So I wanted to just talk about that and then let other people know they're not alone, you know, let people know we're just normal people too. So like talk about video games, things we like to do. And we both love sports. So we talk about that. And my brother-in-law is a former athlete. So he would, you know, we would end up breaking down some sports, but we ended up evolving after having a couple guests on into mental health and listening to people talking about, like, I didn't know there was a difference between sobriety and recovery. Never even heard of it. I had addressed my mental health at a surface level, but that was it. Like, I knew that mental health is important. I knew the mindset was important. I still hated myself. I still, like, you know, my brain works where for some reason, I'll walk through a doorway. I'll remember something I said to somebody in 6th grade and I will hate myself for it. Like and I'll get fixated on it. Like, what was I thinking? Why would I think that's okay? So like going through life like that. And then I got a therapist and I got diagnosed with ADHD because my second child was born. I was forgetting these menial tasks at work that like I had done hundreds of times and I could not even remember where to start. I was not able to really keep time. I missed 2 of his appointments as a baby, and that as a father, that wrecked me. Like, what is wrong with me that I can't take care of this? And there was a lot of stress going on in my life at that point. And so I went in and my wife is the therapist. So she's like, you have ADHD and it wasn't a problem. Now it's a problem. You need to get it go get something.
Yeah.
So I go in and I do all this. Anyway, we start the podcast. I've totally went on a tangent and I'm sorry. So we start the podcast. We get into mental health.
It's fine. I love tangents. And I also have ADHD, so I do a lot.
It's perfect. So anyway, we start talking about mental health and I realize I've never called myself an alcoholic. I've never even considered myself that. I've never looked at sobriety and then looked at my drinking and why did I drink like that? Like why the two are connected, but I never put the two and two together. So we started to explore mental health. Like, I just had a general basis like around it, having college courses. And then, I almost have my bachelor's in psych. I'm like 10 credits away. So I really should go back and get that. But, just like having that and then talking about how that relates to our sobriety. And honestly, as people, as father, as a coworker, I was a foreman, I was a leader at work. So talking about the mental health and everything really combined. And in order for me to take a step forward with my sobriety and enter recovery and be a better person and somebody, I was stuck in a rut and I was sick of it. I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't know how to make my life better. So it was, I need to be honest with myself and on a show. And I don't remember which one it is. I could probably find it. It took me like a second before I said it and I stumbled through the word. I called myself an alcoholic and it was like a year into the show and it was freeing. It was a weight that was there and I didn't know it, that was lifted off my shoulders. And that's just my experience with it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be somebody else's. Like these are all just me, but I think a lot of people can relate to that naming your demons takes power away from them. And I realized I was an alcoholic. I was drinking to shut my brain off and numb my feelings. Why? Why would I do that? Like it just, and then since then it's kind of been a journey of self-discovery, but it didn't start. And then, there's obviously plateaus and everything, but it didn't start until I admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic. Like the reason that I went sober was for me. And it was the first time that I made a decision for myself. And in my heart of hearts, I honestly and truly believe the only way that you can make a major change, like go sober, is you have to do it for yourself. It's the most selfless, selfish decision that you can make because you better yourself and it benefits everybody around you. Doesn't matter who it is. I could do it for my kids, but at some point, and they weren't born yet, but at some point, I would have a moment to myself and I would go back to it. You have to do it for yourself. And it does benefit everybody else. It has made me a better partner. It has made me a better, dad. It's made me a better person. But the same thing is true with mental health, which we've realized. Like you have to want to do it for yourself. Somebody can drive you to the appointment and you can walk in and go through the motions, but that's all you're doing is going through the motions.
Yeah.
If you really want to make a change and you feel like you're in a rut, you feel like something like I said yesterday, like I just made a really big move. I moved across the country of the United States. I'm like 20 hours from home now. And I knew something in my heart wasn't right. And it got to a point where it was like stuck in my throat, where I knew that something had to change. Like every once in a while I would have this feeling like, why am I still doing these same things? Like, why can't I make a change? What is going on? And a lot of it was the culture. I was just stuck in this culture that I did not like, there had to be more out there. And I knew there were because I experienced it. What could I do to change that? And it was move with my family. And so that's like, I made the decision that I wanted to move away from the only place that the only state that I lived in for 35 years. And now I live in a completely new place in COVID and it's really hard to meet people, but it's been freeing, and making these decisions are scary. They're nerve-wracking. how can I make a change? Like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want to be. I don't know what I want to do. 35 years old. I had a job that was a 6-figure job, paid for all the bills, like, and I loved doing it. The culture that existed kept me down. It was a weight on the shoulders. I don't know what I want to do with my life. I know I want to help people. I know I want to help people make people feel better, because that also helps me feel better. But I don't want you to feel alone. I want you to feel community. I want you to know that I've never met you, but I do care how you are feeling. And not just right now in this moment, like when I was drunk, trying to help make people feel better. Like, I care about trying to help other people find what they want to be better for, and it's themselves. And I just want people to know they're not alone.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think when you said it earlier in the story, you mentioned that no one else pushed you to it, and I latched onto that at the time, and I thought, oh, okay, I can see why this has been such a strong step, because a lot of times people, families will host interventions or whatever it might be. Like, people will be like, your drinking has become a problem to us, and you hear a lot of stories about people then getting kind of like coerced into rehab or coerced into a program and having fluctuating levels as a result with it. And oftentimes it is when that person actually makes the decision that I need to do this for me. I need to, it's like for myself, it took me a long time to get to the idea of self first isn't selfish. I try to be better for my kids, because most of my problems, actually, when I put this sentence in isolation, someone will clip this and send it to my kids. Most of my problems started after my kids. What I mean is that I'd done a very good job of sweeping my problems under the carpet until I had kids. And kind of in a similar situation to what you said before about your ADHD, it becomes unmanageable or more noticeable when you've got more things to juggle. I think that, what we don't,
added stress.
Like, every parent in the world knows that they kind of they'll end up losing it over something small, i.e. the child not going to bed exactly when they were supposed to or something. And then we'll think, well, what kind of person am I? What kind of parent am I if this happens? When in reality, you're not losing it over that. You're losing it over the fact that everything in your life you've now got plus this. You're all the same issues that you had before you have, and now you have the extra work, or the extra emotional work, or the extra physical work that it is to actually have children. And yeah, you're I think that's why when people say school's the best days of your life to kids, is because they've got 4 different stresses. Now, obviously, those 4 different stresses still add up to 100% of their stress. But as adults, we've got 40 different stresses, all asking for 2.5% of our attention. It's like, so you finally deal with one, it really doesn't actually make that much of a difference. But so all of these things all do add up. And but at first I was like, right, I'm going to be better for my kids. And then I became a personal trainer. And then I got into a new relationship. Like, I'm going to be better for my wife. And then became a personal trainer. It's like, I'm going to be better for everybody else. And it was ages and ages until I realized the most obvious thing that was lying right in front of my eyes every single time I saw the 2 words was that self-esteem starts with self. I was trying to be good for my kids so that I would feel valid as a human because I'm a good dad. Like, I was trying to be good for my wife because I'd be valid as a human because I'm a good husband. I was trying to be good for my clients so I could be valid as a human because I'm a good PT. And at no point did I ever actually sit there until several years later and say, well, what does it actually mean to me to be? What do I need to do? Who do I need to be for me to decide that I'm valid as a human? And in reality, I was already there with most things, because my expectations on everybody else were here and my expectations on myself were somewhere off the chart, And I think it's really important that you do that. Which actually leads me into my next question for you, which is kind of, obviously, this links back to what we talked about right at the very beginning. You were good at sports, and then you were good at, inverted commas for the people that are listening and not watching, air quotes, you were good at drinking. It's like, and then I imagine you were good at your job, good at being a dad, good at all those things. It's like, how much of your personality was wrapped up in the need to be good at those things?
All of it. I had a perfectionist attitude when it came to myself. And I would tell people this, like, I expect perfection from me, but I don't expect perfection from everybody else, but I expect you to try your best. And that's just setting myself up for failure. And I didn't know that. So, growing up, and I've just recently come to terms with this. Like, I can say that I had some traumatic instances in my childhood, and that my childhood overall was good. It doesn't mean that my childhood was bad, right? But like, there's things that happened in my childhood that have impacted me as an adult. And part of that is like, I didn't have to try in school. I at any point in school, I never had to try. If I showed up, I was a sponge and I was able to absorb a lot of it. But the love that I received from my parents, and I've extended that out to my friends. And, I think for a little while, I thought my siblings were different, but then I kind of learned that no, this is the same. The love that I received was in response to something. It was dependent on me doing something.
Yeah.
It was dependent on me doing all of the chores, not just the chores. It was dependent on me getting my brother and sister to do their chores or do them myself. It was dependent upon me being quiet and letting my mom sleep. It was dependent upon me, just being older than I was. Like, and I didn't realize this till recently. And I've never talked about this on a podcast either, but I know my parents won't find this one. I completely forgot what I was going to say. So, like, the love that I received was dependent upon doing other things. And my intelligence and my opinions were never respected. It was always because I said so. And so going into high school, like wishy-washy what I want to do. I don't know. I never thought I was good at sports, but like other people would tell me, but I never really felt that way. I had a lot of really good friends, but I always felt like an outsider. All of this contributed to this low self-esteem and self-worth and trying to discover who RJ is later in life. But, my parents did the best that they could with what they had, but I never felt the love. And that created a hole in this low self-worth and self-esteem that I tried to fill with alcohol, that I tried to fill with making people feel better, tried to fill with everybody else, just like work, trying to make everybody else better, trying to be the best, because I felt like nobody was going to love me if I wasn't the best. And then when I wasn't the best, because I wasn't the best RJ, so I was never going to be the best at anything, and I never felt like I could, so I'm self-sabotaging. So I felt like I didn't deserve anybody's love. So when I didn't get love, I don't deserve it. Why would I? And this is stuff that like I'm still battling. This isn't something that like it was like a light switch and it's over. Like, this is stuff that I've come to terms with and that I'm working on actively. And like the past 2 months, I've made some really big strides in just being a friend to myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. It's so vitally important as well. It's one of the most overused cliche quotes ever, but not acted upon enough. And the problem when quotes become overused and cliche is people just glance past them. But be your own best friend, or talk to yourself like you would a friend. It's like how many people have seen that versus how many people actually act on it. And often it's like,
also it's a lack of understanding what that means.
Yeah. Well, I think it's often a lack of it's having to unlearn how to be your own worst enemy.
Yeah,
because like you've had if you think about like inside your head there's a coach and inside your head there's a critic, and the critic has had a lot of practice, so much practice, and the coach really hasn't. So when you ask the coach to step up and give the greatest locker room speech of all time, it's like you can do it. It's like Rob Schneider just kind of like sliding in. But But yeah, it's like, but your critics like, oh, sit down. I got this. You're this. You're pathetic. You're that. All that type of stuff. So the critics well rehearsed, and the coach is kind of like, yeah, I've not put my 10,000 hours in. Definitely not an expert. So how to do it is start. Like it's like learning a new skill or learning a new language, even. In terms of,
that's smart. Like that's something that I think we glance over too as we get older into adults. When you start. When you try something new, it's uncomfortable.
Supposed to be.
And yes, think back to the first time you did anything. Were you comfortable doing it? No. Like maybe one thing in your life you have been, but it doesn't matter what it is. It is uncomfortable.
I genuinely wish we could all learn what it was like to learn to walk and what it was like to learn to talk. But we weren't in our own heads at that point. We weren't like thinking of ourselves as a failure or thinking or focus on the fact that I've tried to walk away from the couch 17 times and fallen on my arse every single time. We weren't thinking about that. And as adults, it's like we just focus on the number of times that we fail. I want to kind of, by the way, chat, if you've got any questions you want to ask, please do get them in. I've not seen any yet, so I don't think I've missed any, but I will be coming over to questions from the chat after I ask 2, maybe 3 more questions myself. The next question I want to ask is basically what were the actual health benefits, both physically and mentally, kind of that you acquired as your sobriety progressed? And also what sort of stage did they come in, whether that was whereabouts in the journey?
My mind got clearer. I remember kind of being in a fog, and you don't realize it's a fog, or like almost like a film is like over your brain. And it was probably 6-8 months. Like it just like was bits and pieces were removed. I was able to take things that I learned and apply them to other areas, at work and at home, and just and then kind of think about why I do things and apply it, or get better at doing things, because that's something that I just kind of reacted a lot, and I was lucky enough that it worked out for most of my life. I didn't think about why I did things. I just kind of did it. So like being top of mind as well was a new skill that I kind of had as well. Like I was always looking forward to, when am I going to see this person? Because then we can go drink. Like when can I cut loose and actually, be the life of a party or something? Like that's something. But something that I've learned in the past, few years is I'm kind of an introvert. It takes I'll talk, but that doesn't mean that like I'll divulge personal things. Doesn't mean that I feel comfortable doing it either. I don't feel comfortable being the first person to speak up or doing things, but I also know that like people aren't going to remember it. So why not? Yeah. Like that's something to remember too, you learn this in psych, is people are so focused on themselves that they don't notice every little thing that you do. So if you do something wrong and, you can kind of gloss over it, nobody's even going to remember. If you wore a shirt that had a hole in it, nobody's going to remember. If you rip your pants down the middle, I could tell you from experience, everybody's going to remember that and bring it up for years to come. But at least you can laugh about it. So like my mind clearing was one. I was able to, honestly, this is something that I didn't realize until I talked to somebody a few months ago. Like my taste buds kind of activated. I was able to, like, it was kind of salty, sweet was kind of all I could taste, and sour. Mm-hmm. And now I can tell you ingredients and sauces from tasting it a lot of the time. Like not every single one, don't get me wrong, I don't have that trained of a palate, but I can like tell you, oh, there's sesame oil in that. Oh, there's, like that olive oil that you use in that is really, really good. Like certain things like that, I've been able to, it's happened. But like, it's true about like the sugar cravings. Like I didn't, eat a lot of sugar before I went sober. I've always been, in pretty decent shape. So my weight's fluctuated a little bit more since sobriety, but that was probably going to happen with age anyway. And it's not that I put I'm lying. I did put a lot of stock into my body. I just didn't want to be super obese. And it impaired my motor functionality because sports are important to me. And also now I need to be able to chase two little kids around who are 2 and 4. So, they're active. But I would say the benefits that I've received from entering recovery from sobriety have been more noticeable and in a shorter period of time. So like getting diagnosed with ADHD, talking about my mental health and what I can do, learning new things, new coping mechanisms. I learned how to cook. Like I could cook before, sure, but now I can like take raw ingredients and make something that tastes really good. And like stepping out of my comfort zone and realizing what I enjoy and what I don't is such it's a good feeling. Like, what did I enjoy doing just because I drank? Well, the alcohol's not there. Do I enjoy doing that? No. So why am I wasting my time doing that? And then just remembering, like, I feel like I don't remember most of my 20s. Even like the first couple of years of sobriety is a little bit of a fog because I didn't know what I was doing because I still wasn't living life fully. But like the recovery aspect and everything, it's just, I'm willing to teach myself. I want to learn. I want to be a sponge. Like, I know I don't know everything. And I understand that I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. So if somebody says something to me, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm doing it wrong or something. It just means I have to learn. What do I have to learn?
Yeah.
And when I was drinking, I would have taken it as an insult and I wouldn't have had that. And that's where a lot of it went.
Amazing. Okay, we've already talked briefly on the podcast, but I'd like you to just tell us a little bit more about the podcast, kind of like where can we find it? What is the mission? What's the current game plan? What's the evolution right now?
So it's called Untapped Keg.
Which is an amazing name, by the way.
Thank you. There's going to be, and our logo is a keg with chains and a lock around it. And it's because the keg is there. It's always going to be there. But it's just going to be locked up and we're not going to tap it. So we spotlight sobriety or stories about sobriety and mental health. And we have people on who aren't sober. But like I said, the lessons that you take from mental health can go into sobriety, and the lessons you take from sobriety can go into mental health.
Yeah.
And it's not just mental health. It's physical health. It's, honestly, you could do it spirituality. Like, the lessons are all encompassing if we want to learn them.
Yeah.
So we're spotlighting stories of sobriety and mental health and letting people know that they're not alone. We offer peer support, trying to grow a community so that if, people need to vent, they can vent. And, we can help you get resources, but we're not trained medical professionals. We're just offering up our life experience and willing to learn from you too. And right now we're editing like full hour-long podcast. We record live on Sunday mornings, every single Sunday on YouTube. So go to youtube.com/untappedkeg. Any podcast platform, we're also up. This Sunday is our 100th episode. And
awesome.
We're going to have a mindset coach who does a little more than that. It's somebody who I'm really excited to have on. His name's Joshua Metcalf, and he's written books such as Chop Wood, Carry Water, Pound the Stone, Hustle. Like, the way he looks at things is refreshing, and it's helped open my eyes to my mental health a little bit more as well. And, we've had Adam on to talk about mental health. And then we went on his podcast, and, one thing that I've told him, but I don't know if he understands completely how much he helped me. So I was struggling with my past. I could not forgive myself for being a womanizer, for driving drunk, for a lot of the things that I did when I was drunk. I mean, I cheated on multiple girlfriends when I was drunk. Like, I would wake up and not know where I was. And I had problems reconciling that person with the person that I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And Adam said, why are you trying to forgive yourself? You don't have to move forward. You probably shouldn't. Would, like, a person that you harmed want you to forgive yourself for that? No, they don't care. Like, they have to deal with it and move on. And it's like, that's true. Like, why do I have to forgive myself for the past? Like, I'm learning from it and moving forward. Why do I have to say, like, I've always been an amazing person? Because it's not true. I have not always been an amazing person. Mm-hmm. And I've never scarred somebody severely, but I've left little scars behind. And that hurts me that I hurt someone. And that's something, like, Adam saying that helped me move forward and be able to raise my self-worth and raise my self-esteem. And it just kind of flipped a light switch that I also need to be better for my boys, mm-hmm. to be the example that they need to see and not just tell them what they should do.
Yeah, absolutely. So other than the podcast, I know you've just moved and you might not have the answer to this question just yet, but what's next for you personally?
I really want to take this podcast and bridge out from a podcast. I want to create content around sobriety and mental health that you can see that life is fun when you do these things. It's not dull. You don't lose, the ability to have fun. You don't lose the ability to interact with people. Like, just because you take away a substance doesn't mean there's nothing more to do. So, like, I want to maybe do, like, restaurant reviews based around sobriety. Like, does this place push wine? Does this place push all this stuff? Is it stressful, right? Like, do you come in and there's a ton of people and you have to order real quick off a sign that, well, if you have high social anxiety, that's not a place for you. Mm-hmm. I would like to do stuff like that. I'd like to show, like, cooking channel, or like myself cooking and then have, like, somebody else cooking that actually knows what they're doing and not just winging it, and spotlighting that. Like, that's what I want to get the channel to. And that's why I'm learning how to video edit, and I'm trying to make the episodes more fun and put my personality into it a little bit more, because just because it's a touchy subject and it's got deep, heavy messages and it can be uncomfortable and have deep conversations, doesn't mean it can't be fun too. And I think that's important to capture. So, unfortunately, I'm not at the level yet where we can start full time. So, like, I got a job that I'm starting in a couple weeks, and I'm hoping that I can still grow this thing that I've found a passion in and my creativity for.
Amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Well, I'm really excited to see where you go with it. It's great, the work that you're already doing. It's congratulations on the 100 episodes as well for this.
Thank you.
This coming weekend. And is there anything else before we wrap this up that you would like to add?
I think, like, one thing that I've noticed these past 2 months, and there was a little bit of a breaking point that I'm not going to talk about right now, but that where I kind of changed my mindset consciously. And part of it was I went through and purged my social media. Who was I surrounding myself with? I was following a lot of people who were mad about molehills and turning them into mountains. Mm-hmm. So I went and I followed sobriety and recovery people that were just, like, spotlighting and excited for life. But I left some people whose opinions, like, I really respect. And because you still need to know try to find what you don't know so you can learn. But then who's in your life? And this is hard. right? This is hard. Who's in your life that is bringing negativity and toxicity into it? And are they people who should be your greatest cheerleaders?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to come to terms with, I have to cut out my parents a lot. I have to trim back. They're very toxic, especially when I voice my opinions and it's different. Or like I make a decision that they don't agree with. It's not good for my mental health, and it's not good for my self-worth. And that's I have had to reevaluate the current relationship I'm in. Is this bringing me joy, or is it bringing me toxicity? Like, how am I as a parent, and how am I letting this energy that is in my life affect my parenting? And does that mean that I need to change something with myself?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I make these changes be permanent? What can I do for myself to be feeling better about myself so I can increase my patience? And it's
amazing.
It's just, sometimes you got to make tough decisions.
You're just going to say, it sounds like a lot of tough decisions. Well, RJ, it's been absolutely phenomenal chatting with you today. Is it Untapped Keg on pretty much all socials?
Everywhere. We were able to get Untapped Keg on anything. So we're probably there. I would say the main ones we post to are Twitter and Instagram. Our DMs are open everywhere. We do also have a Facebook. We have a TikTok. Trying to kind of get things everywhere. But, if you hit us up on YouTube, untappedkeg@gmail.com. If you want to be on the podcast, hit us up. We never say no. So we can find a date, and we will move the time to fit your schedule as well.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. There is just one quick question from chat, but I'm absolutely bursting for the toilet. Can I run off to the toilet quickly and then come back and ask that question?
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
That is perfectly fine with me.
Chat, talk to RJ. BRB.
How you doing, chat? I've been trying to follow a little bit as I could, but like my other screen's all the way over here, and I don't want to be rude on somebody else's show, so I'm like looking at the camera. But it looks like the chat has a lot of love in there and supporting one another, and that's a testament to Dave and the community he's created, but all of you as well. Like, all of you being there for everybody. That's inspiring, and that's something that you all should be proud of, that people come in here and they feel accepted. Like, that is something that I have struggled with, is finding a place where I feel accepted. That's why I wanted to leave Wisconsin. Like, I'm a white person, and they took me and put me into a box. Like, but this is not just me. This is everybody. This is just the culture. This is how I feel. It doesn't mean that that's how other people feel. But like, I was a city kid. I was never a farmer. I didn't have a job till I was 18. I was at a gas station in high school, worked around my sports schedule. Maybe it was 17. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so like, I was put in this box and I wasn't really allowed to get out of it. So like, I was a nerd working a blue collar job. Let me tell you, that does not mix well with a lot of people who are closed-minded about a lot of things. And, one thing that I've never gotten along with is a bully. And I think that's where a lot of my self-hatred comes from with the me drinking, is I think I was a bully sometimes. And that hurts me pretty deep. I don't want to hurt anybody. And I know that that's going to happen and that's unattainable, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to feel something when it happens. So, that's kind of that. And all of you are wonderful. So thank you for accepting me into this.
You've just given us the keys to the universe while I was gone, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully, it's recorded so I can listen back to the bit I missed. So yes, the question was, blush, where's it gone? What does RJ do to distract himself from the cravings when they happen? And I'm actually going to extend that question, or is it not about distracting? that's me doing a lead.
That's that is a very good point. So I used to distract myself so they didn't happen. I would especially early sobriety, and I talk about this a lot, is early sobriety, you got to remove the triggers. You got to remove things that are going to cause the cravings because they're going to happen. I was 2 years in and I was at a Christmas party, and one of the guys, so I bought a round of beers for everybody. And it was the beer that I would drink when I went with the guys. It was a Miller Lite. And I had 2 of them. So I had them in my fingers and I'm carrying them. And I had one when I would drink sometimes. So I hand the beer to the guy and I could smell it. Like, this is something that hasn't gone away. I can smell when a beer opens from across the bar. And it doesn't matter if there's food in the way or not. I can still smell that beer. But so I put it up to my lips. And I'm 2 years sober at this point where I haven't drank a beer bottle. I don't even know if I drank a bottle of NA beer, root beer, or anything at that point. And my lips touched the bottle and I'm like, what am I doing? And the guys look at me like, is he going to take a drink? And so it's still there. Like, you need to remove yourself and be top of mind anytime you are going to be in those situations. But here's an example of something that I went through a few months ago. One of my uncles that I was really close with, who he was like a grandpa to me. So my mom's parents passed away when she was very young. So I only had one grandma and one grandpa growing up. And he was always there to talk to me about things that my grandpa would talk to me about. And he would always be there for me because he knew I didn't have the greatest relationship with my dad. And he passed away from cancer after a couple-year battle. And I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to happen. With my emotions, even now, I have delayed reactions to them. So I will put up walls and I will go numb. Like, that's my coping mechanism still. And I'm trying to work through that. But so a couple days later, I was really feeling the loss of him. And COVID had happened and he was very sick. So the last time I saw him, I was standing outside of his door, and he lived 7 hours away. So I was standing outside his door, 20 feet away, yelling into him to see how he was doing. But that hit me really hard. And then I had some other stresses that were going on, trying to be a father. And I was like, I could really use drunk. I want to escape. I don't want to be here. And what I did was I picked out a meal and I started cooking. And I started chopping things up. Then I put my earbuds in because it wasn't quite enough to drown things out, to just let me be. And I started playing rock music that I would listen to in high school that got me through my first big breakup, that got me through a lot of the times, the first time you're really feeling these intense emotions. And I just let it play. And, one thing that I still don't do that I wish that I could do, I don't cry easily. I've spent 20, 30 years not crying. Why are you crying? There's nothing to cry about. So I didn't actually cry till the day of his funeral. But like it let me feel everything. Yeah. And it helped me get through that moment. So you got to find a hobby, something to do with all this newfound time, and don't be afraid to try new things.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Curiosity did not kill the cat. Curiosity is something that gets drummed out of us when we're little, and therefore we don't try new things. But don't be afraid to try new things. And also, as we could linking back to what we said earlier, don't be afraid to fail at new things. Because I hear so many people say, "Oh, I want to start this, but I'm going to be crap at it." It's like, yeah, of course you are. it's like
our first 50 episodes of the podcast were crap.
Yeah.
Right?
No, honestly, I still like to show. I've got a couple of recordings of my first stream I like to show it on stream. Like last week, I showed a couple of progressions that I've made just in the last couple of months, and certain things you don't even realize are bad until you do something slightly better. And it's like I've like even as down to one little tiny thing is I've just started highlighting certain words with a different outline on my thumbnails than I did before. So like I've got light colored words outlined in black and dark colored words outlined in white. And I'm like, and it makes the ones that are outlined in white really pop. So like, whatever the two words are that is the most important in that thumbnail, I'll highlight those. And I'm like, looking at it, and I'm like, I'm not sure I like this. I'm not sure I like this. And then I looked at it side by side against some of the old ones, and the old ones just suddenly look lifeless and flat without it. And I'm just like, sometimes we don't know what the next step is until the next step happens, and then we're like, yeah, actually, this is better. But yeah, I honestly, people go, oh, well, you're such a natural speaker to me, and I'm like, I'm not. I have done thousands of hours of this, and I still make mistakes quite often. And that's fine, but it is about trying. It is about failing, and it's about trying again.
Yeah. And that's when you learn, right? I mean, how much, when you have a success, how much do you actually learn from it?
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot. In fact, if anything, when I have a success, I'm like, crap, how did I get that?
Yeah.
What was different about that one? Why did that one work? And some days you just get it. But also the whole thing is there's no such thing as an overnight success. You know, it's like if I have a video that does well now, it's because of it's not because of that video. It's because of all the ones that came before it that taught me a thing or two, or a podcast that taught me a thing or two. And it's about how everything that I've been through up until that point has culminated towards that. And it's like this one wasn't some sort of breakthrough. It was like it's just that's the one day that the 10 fans that you picked up from every single episode all turn up at the same time. You know, it's like I always say that we've got a lot of regulars, but we've not got a lot of regulars that are all there at the same time. So I can have the same exact number of people in stream, and it can be like 3, 4, 5 different groups of people that I would all consider to be regulars. If all of them turned up on the same day, that's 4 to 5 times the people. Eventually that'll happen, and one day I'll just go, oh my god, it'll feel like an overnight success, but it's not really. It's the relationships that I've built and cultivated with each of those people over the course of 2 years. They just happen to all be there at the same time. Right. I need to wrap this up really, but I want to go back to that question just in case anything's popped into your mind off anything we've talked about. Is there anything else you want to add before we call this to a close?
About the cravings?
About anything. Because I always think that my questions are like, this is what I think's important, and this is what I think. But I'm always very well aware of the fact that I might completely and utterly overlook something that is really important to the guest.
I think the one thing that I want to add about having kids, and this isn't for everybody, right? But first time I experienced unconditional love was as a parent. And that made me want to be better and earn that. And I hope that every single person can find unconditional love. You know, that's something that as humans, we don't know that we need. But if you feel a change is needed, know that you're not alone. And it's scary as hell. But if you feel it's needed, it's probably needed at that point because you actually are physically knowing and being top of mind. And just don't be afraid. You can take things from Dave, you can take things, from so many other people who put out great content, like the Unashamed Alcoholic. You can follow Recovery Posse on Twitter, the hashtag Recovery Posse. So many great people there who are just there to lift you up. And it doesn't even have to be about sobriety. It could be anything. We celebrate mental health. Just, live the life you love, and you'll love the life you live.
Perfect. I think that's an absolutely amazing place to end it.